Good evening. Well, welcome to Laser. My name's Scott Thorpe. I'm the chair of the Department of Art here at Augusta University. And thank you for coming tonight. We're really excited about the evening's presentations. So the Department of Art, our main goal, or I guess probably, I would say our main goal, is to build a creative community. And what we mean when we say that is several things. For one, obviously, we're art, we're supposed to be creative, and we're not a really large department, so we kind of work as a community by ourselves. But we like to extend that to be university-wide. So we want Augusta University to be known as an institution known for collaboration, creativity, innovation within this area. And we also want to extend that to the city of Augusta so that the city of Augusta is known for creativity, innovation, and also as a beacon of art and culture for the Southeast. And so that's our intention over time, is to grow the city, the university, and our department in that manner. So with that in mind, last year, when I was the first year as a chair in the art department, we had that kind of statement going forward, and we were starting to plan the year's activities and figuring out who we wanted to invite in town and what kind of events we wanted to have. And at about then, our Morris Eminent scholar, Cheryl Gold, came up with an idea. This is actually an ad that's running right now in Art in America. And if you pick up a new edition of Art in America, you'll see her ad. And if you notice, the reception, the opening date is this Friday, so you happen to be in Atlanta, just drop by Sandler Hudson Gallery. But Cheryl, what she told me was, she said, I know a guy. And I don't know your history with that phrase, but mine's not so good. I had a neighbor back in Savannah who said that all the time, and it usually meant I was going to lose money or we're going to get in trouble or something like that. But when Cheryl says, I know a guy, you can feel comforted, because in this particular case, this person worked here. This is the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. And the person she was talking about is J.D. Talasek. He's the Director of Cultural Programs for the National Academy of Sciences. And I thought this would be great. We'll invite him down here. We'll have a presentation. We'll have a dinner. It'll be one and done type thing, and we'll be good to go. But once we started talking to J.D., we started to really understand why J.D.'s in the position that he's in, and that's because he's very ambitious and he's very engaged. And so what happens with J.D. involved in things is they start to grow. Whenever you email J.D., he usually emails you twice back. And then a couple of people from different parts of the nation email you back with similar interests, and sometimes you get an international email back from him too. So as we started to plan what we were doing with him, it shortly became a panel discussion. Then we retooled it to be for a larger audience. It became what's called a laser event, and I'll explain that in just a second. And then we became a Leonardo affiliate, which means we do this a lot. Okay? So laser, it stands for Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. And basically, Leonardo is the International Society for the Arts, Sciences, and Technology. And the intention through this event is to foster conversations between these fields that it represents. So it's fostering conversations and collaborations. It's really what we want to do. And being an affiliate also puts us in the company of institutions in these areas. And you can see that we're kind of an island down in the southeast there. And we're in good comfort with Stanford University, UC Berkeley, Westminster University over in London, and things like that. And it's an ever-growing network. I got an email today that there's one in Paris now. And so this is a vibrant, growing network of creative individuals. So how this thing works, there's a structure to laser events, and if you have your program, you'll see it listed on there, and they all run the same. What happens is we obviously have a check-in that comes in at the beginning. Then there's opening comments, that's me. And then there's this time, you'll notice there's two microphones set up in the middle here for what's called community share. Community share is when the audience introduces themselves and lets us know what they're up to. And you can tell us all about the research you're conducting, creative endeavors you're into, or any kind of other interest you might have. After that, we'll have remarks by the host, and in this case, it's the College of Education and the Dean of College of Education, Zach Kelly here. And then we will have a series of brief panel presentations, which are more kind of like TED Talks. You know, they're like 12, 15-minute type things that are visually oriented. And then after that, we'll have a discussion and questions. And the way that works is we can have it many different ways. The panelists can have a discussion amongst themselves. We can have a discussion with the audience. I'll moderate it if we have a fight or something like that. I'll be up here to moderate questions going back and forth. Then after what we'll be having is a reception. We'll have some food in the back, and it'll be actually a working networking session. And the reason being is because the key to these is this right here. It's the community share time. Because the more that we know about you, the more you know about each other. And the more that you know about each other, at the end of this, you can actually go up to people who have like concerns or like interests, and you can communicate with them, you can share your card with them, and you can go out and have collaborative adventures. It's not just about the panelists, even though they're the highlight of the evening. It's also about you moving forward in collaborative adventures. And so that's really what these talks are about. And with this event, it's still growing. Okay, so even after we had our presentation last year, there's been a lot of interest ever since. People are always contacting me about it, and what we did was we kind of retooled it to have a more collaborative design. So now you'll notice as the year progresses, there's going to be a different entity hosting this each time. The College of Education was gracious enough to do the first one, and we're really excited about the program this evening. And I think you're going to really enjoy the presentations, because when I was talking with them individually, you know how you get all excited about things, I was really revved up for tonight. And so it's really going to be exciting. So we're going to do 4 of these per year, and we're going to try to include the community. And if I can just get a show of hands from people who are outside the university, just to see if we're making some traction. Yes, we are. Because we really want to blur the line between the institution and the community, and so we really become a holistic community. But I have to say thank you to a lot of people before we go much further, and in particular, President Keel. He's sends his regrets he couldn't come tonight. He came last year. Also, Dr. Kaufman is here. Thank you very much, our provost. She has been so supportive since the beginning of this, and it's really been encouraging and helped me to move forward with doing this. Also, all the deans who I've been in communication with in the past year have really been encouraging, and in particular my dean, Skip Clark, who's the dean of the Pamplin College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, has really from day one been encouraging me to move forward on this and promoting it with me. So thank you very much for everyone who's been contributing. And I have to throw the Cancer Center in there too, because they're helping us with some funding right now. So thank you. So this is what the year looks like. Tonight we have the College of Education, like I said. Next, on October 25th, we're going to have Allied Health hosting that. And then the Department of Art is going to host one. It looks like we're going to be doing it with cancer research in February 21st. And Office of Leadership Development has got something going. We haven't decided a date yet, but Carol Hess, is Carol by chance in the house? There she is right there. She's up to something. Yeah. And what's called a hybrid summit. And you'll be hearing more about that as times come along. So you can see that this is going to be a continuing effort, and we want you to keep coming back so we can increase our conversation. So LASER, it's collaborative, it's about creativity, and it's about research. And with collaborative, we've got an intercollegiate structure, so we're not just talking about collaboration, we're doing it. There's a difference. We have to do things. And that's what we want you to do after this is over, is to get together and do things. And it includes the community. And we want the community to feel free to come on campus anytime and visit and to see what we're up to. And we want to be out in the community as well. With creativity, it highlights innovation. And it's a great platform for the unique, idiosyncratic, kind of odd innovation that happens sometimes where there's no other clear platform. This is a great way to talk about it. And it's a catalyst for new ideas. Since we had ours last year, we've had several offshoots already that spawned from this. And then with research, basically, it gives us internal recognition. It lets us know what's happening on campus, because through emails, sometimes it just looks like another email about research or something, and it gets filed in that folder. But what we do now is we have conversations about it, and you can visualize what's going on so you can understand. And then as we grow this platform, what we want to do is we want to build some funding. So I might be asking you later for money, I don't know. But we want to put our speakers on an international stage. We want to follow what's called the laser circuit. We want our people going to Stanford. We want our people going to Paris to talk about what's happening at this university. And so that's our plan. So at this point, what we have is the community share. There are 2 microphones in the middle here. We're not looking for anybody doing miracles out there to introduce themselves. What we're looking to understand is what you're up to, what you're interested in, and what you would like to be doing in the future. So when you approach the mic, and I'll be pointing out people who are sitting still because we want to know who you are, please just introduce yourself by name. Let us know where you're from and your interest, research, or activities that you're into. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the time up for that. And if you can go ahead and make a couple of lines on each side, we'll go back and forth. And we got to go. There we go.
Hi.
Carol, go for it.
I'm here representing the ceramics program in the art department. Just letting you know that we are bringing in a ceramic artist by the name of Brian Seabiz. He's coming from SUNY New Platts for a workshop on building a 3D printer that prints in clay. This is the first step towards the digital fabrication in the ceramic arts. So if anybody's interested, you want to talk to Raul Pacheco, and he can be reached by email. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Gold. I'm the person that Scott mentioned, and I would like to invite all of you to my show in Atlanta at Sandler Hudson Gallery. So if you come, look for me, and I will say hello, and we can talk. All right? Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Amanda Baer. I'm interim chair of the Department of Medical Illustration, where we really do combine art and science on a daily basis. I'm also an anaplastologist, and I make facial prosthetics for patients who need their facial features restored. And I combine 3D printing technology with anatomical information from CT scans to create surgical guides for surgery. And I have 2 colleagues here that have been working with me on a concept I'll let them.
I'm Katherine Henderson in the College of Ed here in the Counselor Education Program, and I've been working with
Karen Hyde, and I'm a faculty with the Art Department and also the Senior Director for Academic Planning.
We are collaborating on an initiative that we're calling Art Play Studio. Yeah, I'm a little short. Where we're hoping to offer art sessions for free to Children's Hospital and adults at AU Health that Karen and I will be leading. We're a new nonprofit, so we're looking for funding as well, that we're actually going to get started next week. So we're very excited.
Come on down and help, volunteer. We hope that we will be seeing lots of children on a weekly basis and adults on the hospital side also. So it's really going to be fun, making art with kids.
I'm Jennifer Onofrio from the Department of Art, and my research as of late has involved dealing with physical maladies and mortality, and part of it I think is an extension of having grown up with a neurosurgical father. And my mother's also an artist. I just finished co-authoring a book with the director of the Rochester Art Center as well as Garth Johnson, the curator of ceramics at Arizona State University.
I'm Chase Lanier. I'm an artist locally, and something I'm interested in that area is having more of a dialogue with the general public and within the arts world here in Augusta about aesthetics and getting past our preconceived notions of what art is and being able to actually have dialogue about it, and also moving past our biases in that area. So I'm working on a few different projects recently, and just keep an eye out. There's some other stuff happening around town.
Kristen Casaletto with the Department of Art, and I do always a lot of things all at once, but one of the couple of science-related projects I'm working on right now is one is in making visual art that involves interpreting the summer and winter solstices. So I have, if you see me out tracing my shadows and things on the sidewalk, that might be why. And another that involves building ant colonies and exposing them to different types of sounds and observing the colony tunnel patterns they dig in their ant colonies, and then making art that's related to that. So if anyone wants to play, I like bugs and science and all sorts of interdisciplinary things. Thank you.
I'm Bill Gray with the College of Education. As you've seen when you came in, I work with 3D printers. The one out here I've designed myself and have been working with local schools to help their kids build them. Also help out with the clubhouse when they have special events related to 3D printing.
My name is Ramona Nora, and I work at the new literacy center that we have in Augusta, and it's for students who are several years behind in reading and math, and we're working intensively with them to bring them up to standard. We are looking for people who are willing to come out to our school to volunteer time to expose these children so that they have the equal chance or opportunity to excel. We see a lot of growth already because of the support that Augusta University is providing, but we would love to see the community come out to expose them to a lot of different things.
Hello, my name is Randy Pace. I am faculty here at the art department of Augusta University, and I take pictures. But there's a project I want to start where I don't take any pictures. I want other people to take pictures. So I'm interested in getting cameras in the hands of vets with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I want them to express their emotions through the use of a camera. And I probably need help from doctors with that sort of thing. So their pictures would culminate with an exhibition, and hopefully it would help them learn something about themselves. In photography, we deal with psychology all the time, but I've been tooling this idea around in my head for a while, and this is the perfect spot that I thought I would talk about it. So let me know.
Hi, I'm Jen Stevens, and I'm the gifted specialist at River Ridge Elementary. I'm here with a team of teachers from River Ridge, art, music, regular classroom teachers. Our school is interested in learning more about STEAM and integrating that into our school day. I'm also doing 3D printing with gifted students in 4th and 5th grades and having a lot of fun with that, with the 3D modeling and figuring out how to use that in different ways.
Hello, my name is Tony Robinson. I am the chair of the Westaboo Festival Board. We have a few great festivals that take place in Augusta. Arts and Arts coming up this weekend, but after that, a couple of weeks after that, we have the Westaboo Festival that's taking place in downtown Augusta. It begins September the 28th. The cool thing about that festival is that we bring world-renowned artists to Augusta. So we've got Second City coming, Wendy Whalen coming, Preservation Hall band coming. So if you guys are so inclined, come check out the festival.
Just so you know, Augusta University is partners with the Augusta University.
And we successfully roped Scott in on the board, so yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace Belangia. I work at the Clubhouse, and I wanted to share with you an event that we're doing at the end of October. It's called Harvest Bites. It's BYTES. It's one of our first fundraisers for the Clubhouse. We run it as a nonprofit in the old Richmond Academy building. And if you know about hackathons, it is a 24-hour experience. It's free to participate. We're partnering with Augusta Locally Grown, and we'll be working on real food tech challenges and how tech can help our local community. And then after that, we'll be having a farm-to-table dinner party. So if you want more information, come see me.
Before we move on, I think there's enough educators. We're consider an artist. If you haven't spoken yet, we would like to get to know you a little bit better. Thank you.
My name's Karl Hammond. I teach at Davidson Fine Arts and USC Aiken, and we raise trout, inevitably with the goal of stocking them in the canal, but the canal's drained, so that's not happening this year. But that is an ongoing project in conjunction with Warren Road Elementary School.
Well, thank you. No, we got one more. We got one more? Good. Okay, good. Come on up here.
Good evening. I'm Charlie Tier. I'm the principal at A.R. Johnson Health Science and Engineering Magnet School. We're partnered with AU, specifically the Medical College, with our health science sequence, and a lot of community partners with engineering. We are endeavoring in STEM certification through the State Department education area, and we're doing lots of fun things. We just had a STEM Aviation Day where students, all 700 of them within 55 minutes, engaged in over 30 STEM activities involving aviation, and that culminated a week-long cross-curricular disciplinary study of aviation. So that was our first attempt. It was great, and we have lots more coming up, so we're excited. The next one coming up involves water. We're going to rent out one of the pools, and students are going to build different types of boats, get in the boats, and we'll have a challenge to see longevity, time, and that type of stuff.
You're asking for trouble, aren't you?
That's our middle name.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Steve Smith. I'm a private individual, retired engineer, worked all over the country. Decided that I wanted to help give back to students because I had some good help when I was in middle school. So I have a group called Have STEM Will Travel. So we go to various schools. So I see River Ridge here, and I've already been to the magnet school several times. If River Ridge would like to have us come, we are not educators. We don't intend to be educators. We intend to bring hands-on activities for whatever the teacher wishes their students had more personal experience with. The idea is to help students gain a personal understanding of the information, not just be able to get an answer on a test. Have STEM Will Travel. I have a card.
There we go. See, it's working already.
Good evening. My name is Ken Hilbrandt. I'm the principal at Louisville Middle School in Jefferson County, and we are getting ready to build a brand new middle school in Jefferson County where we're combining two middle schools, and we are going to pursue STEAM certification through the state, so that's why we're here tonight, to learn more about it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And see how that changes the mood in here. No longer a dry academic talk. But at this point, I need to hand the reins over to someone who I greatly admire and really enjoy working with. And over the time, we've really come to have a great relationship. And that's the Dean of the College of Education, Zach Kelleher.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. It is a pleasure and honor to have you here. I celebrate the presence of our colleagues, our speakers here. For in this presence, what you're going to see is the college's commitment to community, to effective teaching, and to meaningful, impactful scholarship that embeds and supports that kind of effort. I must tell you, though, this kind of work tonight can only happen in the context of a university which embraces and celebrates innovation. We work, Scott and I came here July the 1st, same time, and we got here because the provost dared us to come here and has said to us, I dare you to do something innovative. I dare you to shake it up. And so I am delighted to be with Scott to see that we're going to shake it up, and you're being here as part of that journey. So we work in a space that invites innovation and collaboration. College of Education, we are interested in a lot of different areas around health and wellness and exercise and teacher preparation and leadership preparation. And what I've challenged my faculty to consider is, okay, we know how it's been done, and they do it pretty well in lots of places. How might we do this in new ways, in innovative ways, but ways that matter, the ways that add authenticity and relevance and meaning to the practice of teaching and learning? 10 years ago, I had the framework for a book. I had written all that I could, and it made good sense because it was the science of teaching and leading. I got that part. But yet it would not take life. I'm reminding of Gene Wilder, whom we lost just recently, of course, and that moment in Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein, because I look at all the rigorous movies, notice. But he says, it's alive, it's alive. Well, my work needed life. I happen to have the benefit, the pleasure of being married to an artist. And she says to me, I can't make life out of this. I can't make sense out of this. And Karen says, oh, I know what you're talking about. It's the elements of art and the principles of design. Bingo. 4 weeks later, the book is done. It had life, what I had written. And what we struggle with and love to work with the texture of at the College of Education is the craft of teaching, but also the art. The craft of teaching and the art. The science of what we do, but also the part that adds the aesthetic element that makes us qualitatively different. Augusta University has challenged all the deans, has challenged the faculty to do it differently, to shake it up, to make a difference. I stand before you honored to take on that challenge. I want to thank my presenters because in them and their presence here, I have a school teacher who dares to think about learning and teaching with 6th and 5th and youngsters, middle graders in innovative ways. If I used to be an 8th grade teacher, and all you need to do is ask them to be creative. Be careful what you wish for, right? I have a professor who has looked at science and the science of teaching and biology, but also has added a piece around STEAM and innovation around that sort of traditional subject. I live in a place where the College of Science and Math, and we have John Sutherland here, Associate Dean, has all the people who have all the knowledge, and I look to them to help us think about meaningful impact. And in collaboration with Ashley, with one of our faculty, we're going to get there. We will be noted for that innovation and that difference. And then I have a community partner. Eric is here with us from the clubhouse, and in that space, we're going down and visiting with them, and they're working with schools, and they're looking at 3D design, and they're looking at makerspace, and we're wanting to be a part of that as well. We want the College of Education to be a makerspace. What a concept. Doing interesting things. And so when you see them, you see us. When you see them, you see what's the best of Augusta University. I thank you for being here. I'll invite our speakers to come forward. Please. Pro freak, and now he's told me there's a different plan.
You got that right.
Artist. What are you going to do?
Hey, my name is Kendra Finch, and I'm a Spanish teacher by trade, but I'm currently serving as the Technology Integration and Innovation Coordinator at Westminster Schools of Augusta. And my role at Westminster is to help my teachers design really innovative teaching units for their students that will totally transform education in the classroom. And tonight I'd like to just tell you a little bit about my very first experience with design thinking in the classroom and the impact it had on me and the impact it had on my students. So I graduated from Augusta University, and I have to say I felt like I got an amazing education here. I was taught by some amazing professors, and those professors instilled in me a passion to think outside of the box and to try new things in the way that I would teach grammar and vocabulary. Granted, I was a Spanish major, so I knew that I would be teaching grammar and vocabulary to a captive audience of students, and I didn't want it to be boring. And my professors inspired me to do something dynamic in my Spanish classes and to push the envelope and just try to find new ways to shake it up in my classes. And they challenged me to believe that I could empower my students to have an impact on the world around them if I could learn to think outside of the box and try new things. And so I took all of my out-of-the-box thinking ideas and my desire to be innovative and creative to Atlanta with me after I graduated, and I was hired in the private school sector there. I taught in a number of private schools, but the place where I really flourished and grew as an innovator was the Lovett School in Atlanta. Lovett's kind of progressive, and it's a phenomenal school. And when they heard about what I wanted to do in my classes, instead of cringing and saying, well, let's stay really closely within the curriculum, they said, go for it. What do you need? Let us help you. They supported it, and they actually pushed me a little further than I even knew I could go. And it was while I was at Lovett that I came across an approach to learning called design thinking. And it was different than anything I'd ever seen before, because in design thinking, you issue the students a challenge to change the world. That's the first thing you issue. You present them with a problem, and you give them an opportunity to change the world. So that's their goal. So you go through all these steps in design thinking where you learn about the problem and you observe it in its natural occurrence. You develop deep empathy for the people who suffer from this problem so that you can develop a new point of view. And once the students have really been able to step out of their own shoes and into the shoes of someone else and see the world from their perspective, they're ready to ideate, brainstorm, and prototype a solution to the problem that you gave them at the very beginning of the learning unit. And it ends with the students actually testing their prototype, tweaking it, and refining it. And so I looked at the idea of design thinking, and I thought, you know what? This is me. This is what I want to do, because I saw the potential for my students to develop creative problem-solving skills, and I saw it as a great way for my students to develop those deep critical thinking skills that we all know they have to have. I wanted them to see things from multiple points of view. I wanted them to have to challenge their pre-existing assumptions so that they could step back and actually make a difference in the world. I wanted them to question and be curious. I wanted them to fail. I wanted them to learn how to be resilient and how to become persistent, because quite honestly, in a design thinking unit, the first 2 or 3 iterations of your students' prototypes usually don't work. And so I was all in. I was ready to go. And as I tried to familiarize myself with the process of design thinking, I used this is Stanford University's model for design thinking, and I liked it better than all of the rest of them that I had seen, because if you'll notice, these bubbles right here, understand, observe, and point of view, in most other people's models for design thinking, that's called research. But I love the way that Stanford University gave research such a deeper meaning than let's regurgitate information that we have already read from someone else. It actually challenges the students to do research for the purpose of understanding a problem, observing it, and then empathizing so deeply with the people who suffer from this problem that you can develop a new point of view. Then, like I said, brainstorming, ideating, prototyping a solution, and testing it. Well, I set out on my first design thinking challenge, and I thought, okay, where am I going to implement this in my curriculum, and how am I going to sell this to my administration? Because I knew it did have to fit in my curriculum. Well, that point in time, I was teaching Spanish, but I was also teaching a 6th grade World Languages and Communication class. And in that class, my students studied different methods of communication around the world. And so they were studying Morse code, they were studying sign language, and they were studying Braille, actually. And while I was at Augusta University as a student, one of my professors told me, if you're bored in your class, you can be sure that your students are totally bored as well. And when I taught my Braille unit, I was bored. I knew I wasn't engaging. I knew it wasn't creative. I had tried to come up with new ways to present it, but I wasn't an expert in Braille, and so I felt like that was my weakest unit. And so that's where I decided to drop my design thinking unit. And the design challenge that I would issue my students would be to create a product, a system, or an accommodation that would serve the blind community. Granted, I didn't know much about the blind community, but I was ready to learn with my students. And so we set out in the observation phase, ready to observe, to understand, and develop a new point of view. And so we started digging through statistics, and we read, and we looked at data. We watched videos of blind people who were answering questions for sighted people to try to help them understand their world. We went to the website for the American Foundation for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and we read everything they had to offer. And in the midst of that study, my students came across a piece of information that was so troubling to them. Mind you, these are 6th graders who are 11 years old who haven't been jaded by the world yet. They have such a developed sense of right, wrong, and justice, and that good wins. And so when they saw the statistic that 75% of blind adults are unemployed or underemployed, they had a crisis moment. They came to me and they said, Ms. Finch, I don't understand. Why is it that we live in a country that works so hard to protect minorities and of other kinds, but it doesn't seem that there's anything in place to protect the blind? Well, that opened a great door for me to introduce my students to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So with my 6th graders, who are 11 years old, mind you, we started studying federal law. We went to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's all I knew how to do to lead them through this. I thought, well, let's read this and see what impact it has on the blind population and how it would actually affect a blind person in the workplace. And it was at that point that I realized I needed an expert. I could not give my students what they needed at that point. I needed to find a blind adult who would be willing to communicate with my students and help them understand this statistic from their point of view. And I was fortunate enough to come across a young lady who was willing to FaceTime with my students, and she actually explained the Americans with Disabilities Act to them, and she let them ask her questions, and she confirmed that there are laws in place to help protect the blind, and that there are actually tax incentives for businesses to hire blind people. But sadly, she also confirmed to them that discrimination against the blind in the workplace is alive and well. And so my students had a little bit of a different point of view, but we kept digging and we kept observing, and again, they came across a piece of information that troubled them. They didn't know what to do with this information. They said, Ms. Finch, we keep finding this same piece of information that says most blind children attend public schools rather than schools for the blind. And they didn't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, and they said, it seems like if blind students need to be in schools for the blind, it's not fair that there aren't enough for them. And that opened up the door for me to introduce my students to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And so yet again, with my little 6th graders, we started studying federal law. And we started going through the ways that the government promises to supply students with what they need to be successful. And I thought, I think this is why most blind students attend schools that are predominantly sighted children, because our government provides for them what they need. But I wasn't sure if that was why, and I realized I needed, yet again, some experts. I needed blind students with whom my students could communicate. And that is when I came across these triplets. They have actually gotten some national recognition. They were in 9th grade when I met them. They live in Washington, D.C., and I think this was arguably the most impactful and powerful point of the entire learning endeavor for my students, because these blind students totally changed the way my students saw the blind population. And I'm sad to admit they changed my opinion too. I think I had underestimated the blind community as well. I had to challenge my assumptions too in the midst of this learning experience. But these guys right here were so amazing. They taught my students all about Section 504 and all of the accommodations that their public school provided for them. They told my students, we attend a school full of sighted students because this is the way we live. We live in a sighted world, and so it's better for us to actually learn to live in a sighted world. They showed my students how they did their own homework, how they took their own test. They showed my students how they could cook their own food, how they could get to all of their classes on their own. They showed my students how they were designing their own video games and playing video games. They were computer programming at a level that was so far above what any of us could do. It was really embarrassing. And they actually showed my students how they could play sports. They took their walking cane outside and had someone tap on the rim of the basketball goal, and they shot baskets and they made them. They showed my students how they could catch a ball and how they could kick. And my students all of a sudden realized that these blind students had been underestimated their whole life. And they were treated different by sighted people, oftentimes not because sighted people were trying to be ugly or rude to them, but because sighted people underestimated them. And that is when I knew that my students had actually stepped out of their own shoes and stepped into the shoes of another. I knew they had developed a new point of view, and it was time for us to move on to the next phase of the project. So the next phase was to focus. There were a lot of problems that the blind community was facing, and the students had to pick one area that they wanted to address. And once they had chosen the one area that they wanted to address, the one problem that they wanted to solve for the blind community, they had to create a needs statement. And one of my classes, full of 6th graders, created this. There seems to be a misconception among sighted children about what blind students are capable of doing on their own. For that reason, someone must help sighted children see that blind students are no different than they are. And that was their need statement. And from that need statement, they moved on to their ideation and brainstorming point of view. So they got together and they said, how are we going to make sure that blind students and sighted students have a better understanding of each other? Well, these are sixth graders, and so their first idea was to create a sport that blind students and sighted students could play together. And as they started developing that idea, they realized we didn't have enough blind students on hand personally with us. We only had them through FaceTime. So we didn't have physical access to blind students to test this accommodation. We didn't know if the sport that they were creating would be too easy or if it would be appropriate for blind people. And so they said, you know what, maybe we should move on to the next idea. So their next idea, maybe they could create an entire PE curriculum that would allow blind students to participate fully along with their sighted classmates. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And as they started trying to pull this idea together, they realized they just didn't have enough time to create a full curriculum, and we didn't have enough experts on hand to contribute to the input of those lesson plans. And so they went to their next idea. This was actually my favorite idea of all. A young man who ran track said, Miss Finch, I have an idea. What if we created a way for a blind student to run track without any help from a sighted person? What if we created a belt that had a cable on it, and the cable was tethered to a pole in the middle of the track, and it was just the exact right length so that the blind student could run around the track without veering into the lane of someone else, and we could put up a guardrail on the inside of the first lane of the track. Brilliant. But it was so far outside of our budget, and I didn't have the craftsmanship to be able to help them with that. And so we were not able to pursue that idea, but I loved the fact that this young man came up with that idea. I thought, I love the way you're thinking. I wish I could help you do this, but I don't know how to hammer anything. So we moved on to the next idea, and they said, all right, what if we created a new board game that sighted and blind students could play together? And we realized that was where they needed to hang out. That was a good place for them. They had everything they needed. They had access to everything they needed, and so they got busy, and they were throwing out ideas, and it was this little group of 5 kids, and they were working together to try to figure out what the rules of the game would be, and they drew out a board, and they started to have creative differences, and they couldn't get settled on the rules, and they were having trouble getting any direction, and finally they kind of got a game, the scaffolding of a game together, and one of the students looked up and said, guys, I don't think a blind student or a sighted student is going to think this is fun. I just don't think this is a good idea. And they came to me very frustrated. And they said, Miss Finch, we know this is what we want to do, but we don't know where to go with this. And granted, this was my first endeavor with design thinking in the classroom. And I said, all I can say is let's go back to your needs statement, look at the needs statement, and see if that will help give us more direction. And so they did. They stepped back. They reread their needs statement, and after about an hour or two of studying, they said, well, if the goal is to help sighted students see that blind students can do the same things that they can do, we should invent a way for blind people to play a game with sighted children that sighted children already play. And with that, Touch Checkers was born. They got a checkerboard, and they put different textures on every other square. So each brown square would have a different texture so the blind person could feel where the checkers would be able to go on the board. And then they knew that traditional checker pieces would not work for them. Although they look different if you're using your eyes, if you're using your hands, they feel exactly the same. And so they used a 3D design software and a 3D printer to print out their own pieces. The traditional red pieces became cylinders, and the traditional black pieces became cubes, so that they could set up a board and a blind person could easily feel and identify their pieces. And so the day came to test their accommodation. They printed out all of their pieces, their 3D pieces, and if you've ever used a 3D printer, you know that took a long time of waiting. And we were so excited, so all we had was a sock with us, and we blindfolded one of the students and put a sock on his head and put a person next to him who was sighted to play the game. And unfortunately, it didn't work, because The student who was blindfolded had to use touch to feel the squares, and he kept knocking his pieces off of the board. And they were so discouraged because they were so close to solving the problem, and they wanted to give up. And I said, guys, you're so close. Let's think about this again. Think about it in a different way. Do the checker pieces have to be on the board? And they decided to change it a little bit. You see, each one of these pieces got a hole in the middle of it. So they had to redesign on a 3D software, redesign their pieces, reprint them all with a hole, and they designed pegs for each square so that then the pieces would actually fit on the pegs and could not move off the board. They laser cut their board, and I'm going to let my students actually tell you about how their final project turned out.
Our accommodation is a checkerboard with pieces, and the red pieces have circles on top, and the black pieces have squares on top, so the blind person can feel which shapes are theirs and their opponents.
We used SketchUp to come up with a design in the beginning, and then we tweaked it on a 3D printing program called Tinkercad, where we printed it off to the 3D printer, and the board we sent to the laser cutter.
So as you can see, on each piece there's either a circle or a square. And on the board, these little hinges to make sure the pieces don't fall off the board.
We tested our accommodation by blindfolding a student in our group, and we had him play checkers against someone that could see, and he actually beat the other person that could see.
Throughout this project, I learned that blind people are capable of a lot more than most people think. It's just that their eyes don't work. There's nothing wrong with them. They can do anything that any sighted person can do, and they're not any different.
And with that, I was sold. That was the end of my first design thinking unit, and it was a life-changing experience for my students. These are my students now who go through drive-thrus and ask for menus in Braille because they are petitioning and fighting for the rights of blind people. This was the moment when I realized that if I was willing to move just a little bit outside of my curriculum and allow my students to be creative in the classroom, they were capable of absolute brilliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really inspirational. If I could do that with my college students. Here. So next we have Ashley Guest with Integrative STEAM Education.
Good evening. It's hard for me to be tethered to a podium. I'm not usually this kind of person, so if I start flying out from behind, you'll understand. I'm going to press us a little further. Let me introduce myself first from my background. I am a biologist. And growing up, I had such amazing interest in the world around me. I grew up at the feet of an inventor. My grandfather, I sat with him for hours and hours, listening to him imagine what could be possible. He challenged me to figure out a way to freeze a tomato so that if you unfroze it, it wouldn't be mushy. If you could do that, you'd change the world. I was also challenged by my mom to look beyond what was surface. This is the mantra that I heard my whole life. I was challenged by my father to explore music. And so when I went to school, this is what I experienced. I experienced separation. I experienced a right side of the brain and a left side of the brain. This didn't compute with me, and I felt odd. In fact, when I was in science class, I would come home and grab my clarinet, and I would try to understand processes by playing notes. And then I would think, what if I played another note that's not right? What would happen? And then I would think, okay, I think I can do my science or my math now because I understand what if you change a number, or what if maybe this piece didn't work. So somehow in my brain, I was able to look beyond just a problem. I was able to be amazed by what I was seeing, and yet that amazement left me lacking. And so I strove to fill the gap with whatever made sense. Fast forward to the present. These days, a lot of people have gotten that message, haven't they? We talk so often about 21st century habits of mind. Curiosity is definitely one of the centerpieces of these habits of mind. And in fact, I can't even always remember them all, so I wrote them down. Innovation, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, initiative, social skills. A lot of people present that as curiosity as the root of these. But I would submit to you, think about it, we're already well on our way through the 21st century. Are these skills going to be enough? Can we dream together to be focused on what's next? Curiosity helps us give answers that can be given by reference to procedures that we know. Is that enough? I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to go beyond curiosity, and we need to go instead into wonder. Wonder, in fact, allows us to transform ourselves and to go beyond the accepted rules and find solutions that that we can yet imagine. So if we embrace wonder, what does that do for us? Well, have you ever seen a child or an adult that is exhibiting wonder? What do? They gasp. They roll their eyes. They stare. Their mouth hangs open, and you could see a fly go in. They hold their breath. How often do we see that in our classrooms? Wonder exposes our broken knowledge. So we are not just finding a problem to solve, yet what we're doing is realizing the gap in ourselves. So with that astonishment, with that awe, comes an understanding that really there's a piece missing. Those gaps, those chasms that we realize can be filled by science. They can be filled by art. They can be filled by religion. They can be filled by social studies. So working toward the same aim to fill the gap that is exposed when we wonder. This is the future of how we should educate ourselves and our children. Wonder reconnects us with the very essence of who we are, our being. So what does this look like? Well, I'm so grateful to be here at Augusta University because for 23 years I've been teaching science and felt very constrained by content. And yet, pressing the envelope, continuing to wonder, I began the design processes in my own classrooms. I'd like to show you a very brief video of a result of one group that I worked with, college students and high school students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors with freshmen in college, and what they produced when we allowed them to wonder.
Essentially, the process of the design of the art was I just want to do a collage of a bunch of different shapes. Some of the inspiration I got were from, of course, pictures of sponges, but I associated those with the shapes of nuclear cooling towers, and you can see that in the art. There are many awkward shapes. So I kind of, that was the base, and I took that and kind of bent it around, added different sizes of them, and then, of course, added the color.
It was a project that Miss Chase brought up, and we were all really excited about it. She was just kind of brainstorming it at the time, and we were all like, yeah, let's go for it. We went to the STEM school one morning, and we all just kind of sat down at a table. They paired us up, and a 2D drawing people, 3D students, and biology students all just brainstormed different ideas, and we came up with Deerhorn Coral.
I've really liked the idea of being able to collaborate with other people to be able to do things, especially artists, because as a scientist, I'm able to have one particular viewpoint on a subject. With malaria, it was the effects of malaria, where it is from, and how it was able to affect a giant population. But collaborating with an artist was able to give me a whole new perspective on a way to look at it.
Definitely learned a lot about, as far as really value in art and shape, and of course the artistic techniques. But aside from that, also learning about the science side of it was also very beneficial.
So my project represents the coral, and the red on the top is an oil can. So my little impact is that the coral is a habitat for fish. They live in it. And the big deal is the oil can with the oil pouring down. It's showing pollution and the effects, and it's killing. There's no coral at all where the oil is. It's ruining the home for the fish and the environment in general.
I enjoyed it every step of the way. Between meeting with the artist for the first time, studying the topic, getting to know it a whole lot more, and then having everything just come together, because the steps and the planning that went into it never really seemed that they would piece together. But in the end, when we were able to get the pictures with the artist statements and then the pieces of art together, it all just kind of clicked. And that was an amazing thing for me, because when you're looking at this, it's not something you necessarily see at first.
Science is not my best subject. I knew absolutely nothing. I thought sponges were something that lived in the bottom of the sea, like SpongeBob or something.
Well, it definitely shows that art and science are related, and it's one of my better pieces, and I'm very proud of it, and I would have never thought of it if it wasn't combined with the science.
These students were tasked, the biology students were studying little things under a microscope, and the topic was small world, big impact. And they had to teach the artists the biology, and the artists taught the scientists the art concepts, and both were held equally accountable for learning objectives. It was amazing. So what is the future? The future is here in the CSRA. The future is collaboration with Augusta University. The future is now. Thank you.
All right, so next we have Eric Parker, Innovation Architect and co-founder of the Clubhouse downtown in Augusta.
Clicker here. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I start out with a really heavy quote. I found this quote in 2004. I just started my architecture firm. I was out in Silicon Valley. It was called Conema Architects. The idea is it was trying to get back to the idea of what is architecture, and it was creating a constructed image for our clients, and hence the name. But my very first client was the Electric Power Research Institute, and they had hired me to redevelop their campus in Palo Alto for their headquarters. And they had about 8 different buildings there, and I walked in the first day, and the CEO gave me a list of scientists in the field of electricity that had made a significant impact. And he told me to do some research and get inspired and design them a building. And I instantly came to this quote from Tesla. I won't read it because you can, and it would take me a bit of time. But in any case, they suffered from a culture where the people at the company really didn't connect with each other in any way. It was very fragmented. They were spread across 8 buildings. It was impossible to find your way through anything. And in the course of the project, I was able to work with them to redefine their company culture, get them to fit into 4 buildings. They were allowed to sell 1 building in Palo Alto that paid for the construction of the entire project. And then they were also a nonprofit, so they were able to sublease out 3 of the other buildings on campus to SAP software, which funded their research for the next 10 years. So anyway, it was a successful project that led me to start what turned out to be a fairly successful firm in Silicon Valley. By 2008, in the summer, I was working with a number of marquee clients like Stanford University and Mercedes-Benz Research and Development. This is a picture of their Advanced Design Center in Carlsbad, California, that I had designed. And things were going great. I was managing $20 million worth of construction. I had 8 people working for me. And then September 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And within 1 week, all clients but one called me up and put their project on hold. And really from that point, it took about 2 years for the money to run out and for me to finally lay off all the employees, but everything that I had built in my career vanished, and it was all the result of something that was completely out of my control. It was the result of a culture of economic greed that we've all come to live in. And I began to work. I'll go ahead and advance. So I came back to Augusta in 2010. Basically, once the money had gone away, I bought myself a used RV and I drove my family across the country. And I showed up in Augusta, Georgia, which was my hometown, so I could be with family and regroup, and figured it's a low cost of living. That's the thing that we always advertise to people for why to come back to this area. So I was able to afford it, and it was great. But, of course, right after I moved back here, my mother passed away, and then I thought, well, great, I moved back to Augusta. My mother passed away, and I was here to be with family, and I don't know exactly what I want to do. So I honestly checked out for a year. Fortunately, I was able to sell a house in San Carlos, but close enough to Palo Alto where it was worth something. And lived off of that for a little bit. I managed to get a client, though. I got a phone call out of the blue during that sabbatical year from a company called Innovation Endeavors. And I had never heard of the company, but it turned out it was the venture capital firm that Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google, was starting. And it was a project that began to really change my life. Through the course of doing that project, I got exposed to the D School at Stanford University. I got exposed to another entity there called Hacker Dojo, which was a hacker space where people would get together and write software code with each other and learn from each other, and they would develop new technologies and new companies. And I also got involved with the tech shop there, which was a big maker space. I actually took the staff from Innovation Endeavors there, and we prototyped the furniture for their offices at the tech shop, and we ended up building that. And it turned out to be a successful enough project that the D School at Stanford published it in a book called Make Space: How to Set the Stage for Creative Collaboration. Kind of an amazing experience there with that happening, but developed enough of a relationship with Innovation Endeavors where when they were trying to organize an event called Super Happy Block Party, they gave me a call. They wanted me to be the innovation architect for the event, which what that meant was designing interactive components to get a group of artists, technologists, and entrepreneurs to engage with each other in a street festival environment on problem-solving different challenges. So I went out there, and I kept planning this event with them, and I would tell them every single time, because I had become entrenched somewhat in Augusta at that point, and basically between the sabbatical and doing that one project, your mind goes crazy, and you ride a bike a lot, and you get in good shape. And it gives you lots of time to think about what you think the world should be like. And so I would tell them what was going on with our university system here and the potential I thought it had. I would tell them what was going on at Savannah River Site, the fact that, you know, we're one of 14 cities in the country that has a national lab, which is quite an amazing asset if people don't think about that enough. And Fort Gordon hadn't really made its cyber waves yet, but I knew, as you know, the home of the Signal Corps and with the Cyber Center of Excellence, that there was a tremendous potential for what we could do from an IT talent perspective. And so I would tell them this every single time I would meet with them. And so finally they said, you know what, why don't you come to Super Happy Block Party, and you can set up a booth and you can tell everybody about Augusta. And that idea seemed really boring. So instead, I tried to recruit some people from Augusta to come with me. We made up a bunch of shirts that said Hack Augusta, and we walked around and we asked them, you know, we have a national lab, we have this university, we have Fort Gordon. How would you create a culture of innovation and collaboration? And we would just listen to what they said over and over and over again, and we would give them a shirt and we would take a picture, and that was that. But what came out of it is that they all said you should organize hackathons. For those of you that don't know, a hackathon is a 24-hour challenge usually. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it goes shorter, where you get people together to essentially go through this design thinking process related to who knows what and see what comes out of it. So came back, the very first hackathon was organized on about 2 weeks' notice, not knowing any developers in town, but knowing that I had a really cool Twitter handle that said Hack Augusta on it, and went out, and if you were in the Augusta area and you had a computer language or anything techie related to what you were doing there, I tweeted at you and said, hey, check out this hackathon, you should come. So 35 people showed up. They spent 24 hours trying to build a company together. The company failed, but it was the start of a community. We got everybody together again for another event that was actually in this very room called Hack for Education. And at that event, we all worked together to develop a low-cost, actually, I say low-cost, it was a free internet service for one area of Harrisburg. We had one group that worked to develop a high-gain Wi-Fi antenna so that they could broadcast internet at a neighborhood level. We had another group that developed a website that aggregated all sorts of educational resources and activities that were going on in the community. And we had another group that, you know, basically put together a bunch of Raspberry Pis and set up a way where they could teach the kids in the neighborhood how to do that. But the even bigger thing that happened out of that was that I went around the room and asked everybody, you know, wouldn't you like to do this every day? Would you be willing to pay $100 a month for a membership in a space where we can do it? 12 people said yes, and we opened up a storefront on Broad Street called the Clubhouse. So that gives you a really quick overview. Now I'm going to start kind of decompressing some of this stuff. I use the term hacking a lot. I think a lot of you probably think of it as breaking into computers. It's really not. That is a very specialized form of hacking that takes advantage of knowledge for specific gains that may or may not be worthwhile, depending on your suit in regards to it. But fundamentally, hackers seek to understand systems so that they can create change. Now, I'm an architect by trade. I'm not a programmer. I can do some of it at this point. I've spent enough time around them where I do it. But I was still struggling as an architect with how can I impact our city, you know? I can't go downtown and redesign all these buildings. I need clients, right? Architects don't pay for these jobs. They just design them. So what I started looking at was, what is it that makes up our society? How is our society built? And what I came to is that our society was built on the notion of hub and spoke architecture. And in that, what we've done as a civilization is that every single one of us wants to be an expert in something. We want to be that central person that everybody comes to so that you build up this network and it's worth something to you. And as companies we do it, as cities we do it, we build our transportation systems around it. Our whole country is built, and not just our country, our world is built around fundamentally competing with each other to be the central expert, the central resource, the central point of exchange of what's going on. When I was at Georgia Tech getting my architecture degree, my thesis in urban history was on the development of the city of Atlanta. So I got very intimate with this map over time. And if you look at this map, that star is Augusta, Georgia. And that star, and when you see the lines passing through with the interstates, that tells you a lot of why Atlanta's what it is and why Augusta's what it is. You know, to go to Greenville or Savannah, I have to take back roads. It seems kind of silly. They're pretty big cities, and we're the second largest city in the state. But Atlanta is the center of a vast hub and spoke network that has brought in all the resources, and it's all the decision making. And don't get me wrong, I love Atlanta. I lived there for a long time, and I traveled there quite a bit. But this interstate map started to change the dynamic of our society. It started to create financial hubs that really thrived. This is San Francisco, where I spend a lot of time, but if you go to any of the big cities that are central points on that map, that's pretty much what they look like. But the peripheral spokes, they're much less served by that network. This is a picture here in Augusta of the Miller Theater and what's happened to it in that same period of time. But even at those hubs, around the edge of them, you've got these mega cities that completely challenge the quality of life. And you know, by 2011, this is a photo from Occupy Wall Street, but you know, the world had come to start to realize there's a little bit of difference between haves and have-nots, and we have a culture that's not getting along, and some of us feel like we're losing, and some of us feel like we're winning. Fundamentally, I'm not going to take much of a political stand on Occupy, but we all know it didn't really, you know, go much beyond that. But what I started looking at still further was just the basic economic data. So this is a county-by-county map of median household income in the U.S., and the cream color basically is where your median household qualifies for federal economic assistance. And if you look at that map and where we live, we are surrounded by that. There's certain centers in the country that don't. So I've been very much struggling with how to impact that. And so my question really became, how do we hack society? And if you look at Metcalfe's law, it's basically that the value of any network is proportional to the square of its connected users. So the way we've structured our society, I'm actually going to try this laser pointer, is the hub and spoke. And so within the hub and spoke network, everybody's connected back to the center of the network. There's 6 connection points. It's a value of 36, taking the square of that. For the nodes themselves, they really only have the one connection. You can't even really square that for anything, any real gains, so that value is 1. But if we get rid of a central piece and we figure out how we all interconnect with each other, how we collaborate with each other, then all of a sudden, goodness, I forgot, is there any math teachers here? Big number. So this brings me back to the Clubhouse and what we do and what is our mission. The Clubhouse's mission is to inspire ideas, create companies, and build communities by connecting learners and leaders in technology, business, and design. In practicality, what that means is that we have a maker space, we have a co-working space, we try to partner with other organizations in town to help them accomplish the things that they want to do and to connect our members with them so that they can accomplish the things that they want to do. We function on a few core values that essentially are there to encourage people to take chances, to really push themselves, but set accountability measures so that they follow through on the things that they say, so that they build trust with other people, they share their solutions with other people, and they all find a way to work together. So now you may be asking, does this really work? Well, we've been around for about 4 years. We've helped over 1,000 people learn a new skill of some kind, whether it's coding, whether it's design related, whether it's learning how to 3D print, whether it's learning how to run a business. We've had over 60 ideas in our space that have created 25 businesses and 75 jobs in our community. Economic impact-wise, I'd have to get an economist to do a more accurate calculation, but I look at that as about a $7 million a year annual economic impact from what the Clubhouse is doing. And personally speaking, it's completely changed my life. I think Zach probably wanted me to come here and talk a little bit about education. So if you see that, that's a robot that we created, Sumo Robot League, and it's a 3D printed robotics curriculum that we developed. And it's taken me all the way to Seoul, Korea this summer, where I got to exhibit to 300,000 people there. And we actually have a distribution deal where we are selling robots in Korea now to schools there to teach them how to do this, as well as all over this country. It's also gotten me invited to the White House 3 times. Nobody ever thought to invite me to the White House when I was designing buildings. But now that I'm working on this, it's completely different. So that's Grace and I actually a couple weeks ago at an event called the Nation of Makers. And so we were invited along with everybody else there who is a makerspace organizer in the country to talk about how do we make makerspaces bigger, better, stronger, build more of them. And we are actively in the planning process for setting up, so I am on the Measuring Impacts Committee, so I'm trying to figure out how we actually measure what happens, and Grace is working more on how do we tell people what happens, because that's much more of her skill set. Has done a ton of other things, but those are some great highlights. What is mesh networking in practice? So 2 days ago, I got an email from, today's Tuesday, Monday, I got an email from the Lieutenant Governor's office asking me for a list of organizations in Augusta that support entrepreneurs. So this slide's fresh. Whoa, steal my thunder. So anyway, I came up with 10, with some that I know and some from doing a quick search. And there's things ranging from the clubhouse to the Advanced Technology Development Center, to Augusta University's Office of Innovation Commercialization, some angel investment networks, and so forth. But I started thinking about this in the terms of my network that I talk about. So in our current competition model, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't know where to go. Each of us is competing to be the central resource that all of those entrepreneurs go to. So this network value maybe has a theoretical value of 100. Don't ask me what units those are. But none of us are coordinated in any way. In practice, if we can start to build the connections, work with each other, understand what the expertise of each organization is, figure out the ways that we can partner together and how we can refer people back and forth and really serve them, then the value of that network is this theoretical 1,849. I don't know, like I said, exactly what those numbers stand for, but I like the visual graphic that we're building this big net that'll catch anybody if they need help. And so this is what's going on in entrepreneurship. Imagine cultural institutions, imagine things to support education, you name it. The question is, how do we work together? So I'll leave you with this. It's a quote that's really driven me throughout everything that I've done in my career, especially through the change, which is a quote from Michelangelo, which is that an artist must not be bound except by the realization of the idea. I'm an architect. I didn't think I was going to be helping a bunch of techies do all these things. I didn't think I was going to start an entrepreneur support organization in Augusta, but I want to make change, and the only way I can see to do it from where I am is what I'm doing. And I encourage everybody here to do the same.
So what we'll do, we're going to sit up here at the front, and we will have a discussion. And what you can do is come to the microphones to ask us questions, and I will sit up here as well. And we encourage everybody to come up and ask. And I'll sit over here, and we'll be sharing microphones. But I'll start with one question, because a term came up several times in these presentations, and that's design thinking. And I'd like to ask our panelists, what exactly does that mean, and how does that differ from other ways of thinking?
Since your talk was
well, I guess I look at design thinking. I look at it from the perspective of education, and through that, it's just the steps that are involved in shedding our pre-existing assumptions and making sure that we really have eyes that are open to see new ways to develop. And as I walked my students, and I have walked my students through that, that's really, to me, the most important point of the journey, is when you realize that you have challenged your assumptions and you have shed them. So.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to, and you hit on it so well, is that you're going to fail. Accept that. Accept the process of figuring out those iterative steps one by one of what to do, and do it all knowing that you've really developed an understanding, some sort of empathy for an end user case.
And from my perspective, utilizing a STEAM pedagogy to teach others. It doesn't have to be in a classroom, it can be anywhere. But to be able to manifest knowledge, to be able to demonstrate that you have deep understandings and significant understandings of what you're being taught, that once you go through this design thinking process, it doesn't have to be one way, one test that you can show proficiency. You can show this via, in the art context, you can show it via a dance, you can show it via pottery, you can show it via painting. On the other side, you can show it via an engineering output. So the key point to design thinking from my perspective is that you allow your students to demonstrate the content and practice of the disciplines that you're teaching within the context of either art or engineering technologies.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would even throw out, and I could be wildly off here, but fundamentally, are all of our answers in this world, and is our knowledge absolute or is it subjective? And to me, when I look at other things out there in the world like Six Sigma, to me it's saying like we can fundamentally control everything that's going on in this. And when I look at design thinking, it accepts that you have no real control and you need to be adaptive in what you do.
Which is the future, which is where we are.
Okay, we're going to need you to come over and start asking some questions pretty soon because we need to have a conversation for this to continue on. I do have a follow-up question that I would like to ask because whenever you're implementing something new like that, there's difficulties with getting buy-in in all levels with people who have a traditional way of thinking and they want specific outcomes. How do you overcome those things and how do you implement it from the beginning?
That is a great question. Luckily, when I embarked upon my first design thinking unit, I was in a school that celebrated that. That is not always the case, and that has not been the case since then in all respects. And I think one of the ways to get buy-in is to show the value or show the way that the project is cross-curricular. So for example, in my design thinking unit, what I didn't show you is that my students were writing journal reflections, and we asked them, I checked with their English teachers and said, what are you studying in your grammar classes? And so I would make them rewrite their journal entries, including 2 transitive verbs or 2, whatever the case may be, sentences that started with different phrases. And so I made it cross-curricular so that there was more buy-in. And when I talked to the history teachers and let them know that our 6th graders were studying federal law and said, hey, can you do anything with that in your classes? They said, oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. So part of the buy-in for me in the education realm was making it cross-curricular so that the other disciplines saw that my students weren't just going all over the place and, hey, we decided to throw off our real class for 6 weeks and do this project. They were doing, I think, way more than most 6th graders do. I didn't mean for that. I didn't mean to study federal law with them, but it's where it led us. And so I think one of the important parts to getting buy-in is to make sure that you're making the unit cross-curricular so that math feels supported and that language arts feel supported and those other disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, what I've, started to realize, because when you start an organization called Hack Augusta, you're a little bit confrontational, and what you have to recognize is, what's in it for other people when you want to accomplish something, and so it's just, I think I initially took the design thinking approach and looked at how do I help these developers do what they're doing. But I didn't think about all these other people in a support network and what I needed from them and what's in it for them. And so over time, it's really been this education of, okay, how are we really helping everybody, like you're saying, in a holistic way, and being able to articulate that to them. And so, we've been able to develop a number of partnerships of late with the university because we've started really looking at this from the standpoint, one example is that this mesh network, it's all theory, everything I showed you, but we have partnered with the university on a grant application to actually develop a communications framework so that spaces like the clubhouse can better interact with each other and track what's going on. And so, there's a lot behind something like that that we can't do that actually is very important for the university to be involved in. And so it's taken us a while to understand what that dynamic is and what that relationship is, but now that we do, we start to see a lot of action.
And let's be careful too. Let me speak to the educators out here. Those of you in science and math and art, it's important that you don't compromise rigor. So this is not, and you heard Kendra Sue say that so eloquently, this was deep and significant learning. There was no compromise going on. In fact, it became more efficient learning. It's not about dropping in another project. That's not what this is. This is about making a difference. This is about claiming your space and allowing your students to claim theirs and being necessary in the community, because that's what we're lacking so much as they leave us. They go and they're concerned with themselves. That's not a good society. And our responsibility is to make those people who we're trusting when we're in the old folks' home. And frankly, I've got 4 children, and one of them I guess I didn't do such a good job with because she's like, sorry, Mom, you're on your own. The other 3 are like, oh, don't worry, we got your back. So maybe I did a better job with them. That's the oldest that has the issue. It's a joke, but it's serious, right? How many of our students are growing up to be that member of society that's going to be responsible and be able to think beyond the moment?
We have questions? I know you drove a long way. Just hop up to a mic right over there.
And I know you've said it, but I just want to kind of make sure that you emphasize it. Sometimes when we talk about STEM, we always look for those gifted students that excel, the ones that already have and are going to continue to have. But how do we address that need for those students who have very few opportunities, but you know that there's something there? What are you doing in the community?
So,
I'm not fussing, but
no. I actually love the question because, it's maybe not a natural fit that we got into education, but we did because in the course of one of our days at the clubhouse and what we do, we came across an infographic that showed who's the highest paid public employee in every state in the country, and in 43, it's an athletics coach. And so that's why we started Sumo Robot League, because we thought the only way to get people to care about STEM is to make it a sport. And so once we went down that path, we also realized we have this maker space and we have all these 3D printers that no one's using. So why not make our robot 3D printed? And so everything just kind of evolved from that. But for us, it's always been how to create more entry points for people so that the program itself is accessible to everyone and not just the people that are already into robots.
Organizations are wired to protect the status quo. I would ask, how have you created a support network so that you're disrupting the environments in which you work? So where are you finding a way to disrupt a place that doesn't invite disruption?
A lot of the success has been out of town. I didn't mean it that way. So yeah, we've helped about, I was counting it up, 19 different cities and universities and organizations start up makerspaces at this point. We travel around the country, and when I talk about mesh networking, I really mean it. We're doing everything we can to create that with them. But what we do, and this is maybe going to be a little bit different from for everyone else, but every single program that we implement, we look at it as a standalone business. Can that be sustainable? Can it generate revenues? So, we're trying to launch a code school right now, and yes, we'll apply for grant funding to get something off the ground, but we have to have a financial model to support it after that because grants go away. And so I just look at grants as my kind of nonprofit form of venture capital.
Let me say that to answer that question, in my short time here in Augusta, I came from Virginia most recently, originally from South Carolina, so I feel like I've come home. I have been amazed at the disruption that is going on in our CSRA schools. And let me just say that are they where they want to be or need to be? Probably not. But the bravery of the teachers that are out there day in, day out, putting their foot out is astounding. And let me say to those people who are here and maybe beyond, Augusta University is here to be your support so that you can persist in your disruption. That's why I'm here, and that's why we exist.
And I swear Dr. Kelly here did not pay me to say this, but when I moved from Atlanta, I was teaching in the lap of luxury at an amazing school that loved and celebrated anything innovative that I threw their way. But a school in Augusta said, can you bring that to us? Can you bring some of that to us? And the headmaster who brought me said, you will feel some resistance from the teachers, but I know this is where we need to go. I was terrified to move because I was scared that I would be running alone, that I would be leaving the hub of all of this great innovation and coming to Augusta, and I kind of felt like I might dry up. But I was fortunate enough to be connected to Augusta University by a guy back there, Gil Redpath, who introduced me to some people at Augusta University. And I'm not saying this because the school paid me. They didn't pay me to say anything. But this is where I come to be reassured that I'm moving my school in the right direction. This is where I come to feel refreshed. And I know that sounds so weird, but it's where I come and I walk through and I see these certain people and I just get this feeling of, yes, we're like each other. And for me, being in a school that has one of the visions being a college prep school, when I can go back to my teachers and say, guys, I know you're passionate about preparing your kids for college. What they are expecting them to do in college has changed. They are disrupting normal college classes now. They're changing it. And so I need you to believe me when I'm trying to lead you this way. Trust me, I'm following where Augusta University is leading us, and this is where we're going.
So I've been intrigued by the title of the session this evening. I found two words that were kind of troublesome to me. The first one was synthesis, because it's so ill-defined, depends on who you're talking to. And then the second word that troubled me was bridging. And I look at the idea of bridging often between policy and practice in my particular area of interest. I recently had a conversation with a colleague about STEM and STEAM, and we had very distinct perspectives that were not similar. Which pushed me to try to look at things from the point of view from a scientist. I'm an artist, I'm a musician. And in some of my reading, I read comments that the dean of the School of Engineering at Georgia Tech had made, and I wrote them down so I can get them accurate. So quoting him, he said that adding the arts to STEM could distract students from the underlying strategy of STEM, which is to prepare students for engineering, technology, and science professions. So here you have a person in that role of being dean of an engineering school making a stance about what STEM is and his concern about introducing the arts to that. Then I read some words from the past president of MIT, Dr. Charles Vest, and he made comments about his observations of any high school that's really succeeding today has found the way to integrate the arts into the curriculum in a very important way, not in a passing manner or a polite nod to, but in a very important way. He went on further to say that he could not imagine MIT without an arts component. It just wouldn't be MIT. So my question finally is, when you have people of that of those stature, of those two gentlemen, with very polar positions about what STEM is, what STEAM is, and what arts could possibly be, how do you go about making that bridge?
You go first.
I live in this space. Remember, for 23 years, I lived in biology and chemistry. I was a straight science teacher. I have advanced degrees in that realm. But again, remember what I told you was I never fit. How many people do we turn away from science because we don't let them fit? Is there one way, is there one methodology to grab onto and hold science, technology, engineering, and math content? I would submit to you that the answer is a resounding no. Instead, what we should do is look, again, maintaining the rigor. We should look to allow these students to meaningfully construct significant knowledge in the realm in which they feel comfortable. And let me say, that's not saying push away one or the other. It's doing both together, side by side. That's the difference. Let me also caution us as we go forward and talk about STEM and STEAM. Nationally, we still do not come to consensus as to what that is. And so as we move forward, hand in hand here in Augusta and the CSRA, I would encourage us to think thoughtfully about that. What is STEM? Is it simply S.T.E.M.? That's the perspective of the person from Georgia Tech. They are engineering after all. I would say that if you have STEM or STEAM with no dots, instead what you're looking is an integrative way of thinking. It's an approach to learning, not learning in and of itself. I know that sounds like a small thing, but it's huge. Because we're talking about an approach. We're talking about developing habits of mind to allow people to be successful. We're talking about allowing people to feel positive about persisting in those STEM. We know now that we're not doing it if we stay business as usual. And what kind of repercussions do we know are happening already globally? Because we refuse to see it any different way.
So I think of it too, just from the standpoint of being an architect who went to Georgia Tech, and so. But
sorry,
that's quite all right.
I went to Virginia Tech, so.
No, it was weird being the designer in a school full of engineers. But from day one, we were told how our entire profession was at this intersection between art and craft and technology and all of these things, and that we had to understand the science and we had to understand the art. To me, there's always been an absolute coexistence of them, and so I've always found the debate kind of silly. I create the separation in my mind that technology, fundamentally at its core, is a tool that you use to accomplish a given task. Art is really the task that you're trying to accomplish itself. That's your pursuit. That's the thing that you really strive towards. And every time we try to separate these, we do ourselves a disservice. I mean, language itself is an art. I mean, we call it that in the class. Why do we not think about that? You know, when I use a paintbrush, I've got a tool. When I write code, I've got a tool. They're just tools. Like, why are we continuing to create this separation?
Well said.
Questions? I have one for both Kendra Sue and Eric, and then I'm going to have a follow-up and throw Zach under the bus, so be ready. So basically, you are the two speakers who are from outside the university, and you have great ambitions and things that you want to do, and you want to be more collaborative, you want to be integrated and supported by the university. What can we do to help that along its way? And Zach, what are you going to do about this?
Oh boy. So, I mean, one is we're trying to work with the university on a couple of specific grants, but I think of our space, the clubhouse itself, as being a space for this entire community, and I think that having it as, you know, if the university ever thinks of it needs a makerspace and it needs an innovation center and we need one, and honestly, I'm the Mesh Network guy, so everybody should have one, right? But I do think that at this stage of where we all are as a city, that working together to create one place where we can gather and develop that sense of community is important. And there's certain aspects that we need to come here for to grow our community, and I think that there's certain aspects that I think that the university needs to come, visit us as well.
Oh, wow. I have so many great plans for Augusta University and Westminster. But the first thing, I'll say that right now I teach a Spanish 4 honors class. It's the pre-AP class. I teach the whole class in Spanish, but I have designed it to be a global and social issues class. And each unit, we just finished a unit on biological weapons and biological warfare. Doesn't seem like it has a place in a Spanish class, but it really ended up being a fabulous learning unit. I was so far outside of my expertise that I was treading water to stay three days ahead of my students because I'm studying the Geneva Convention and the Geneva Protocol. I don't know a lot about chemistry and biological weapons, but right here at Augusta University, there is an expert in any field that I would like to introduce my students to. So any of those topics that are outside of my realm of expertise, you have. And that, I would love to bring some people in who could make that learning experience for my Spanish students so much richer. And it doesn't mean that I expect everyone who comes to speak Spanish to my students, because again, I'm trying to break the walls of my classroom down so that, yes, I am teaching them Spanish, I'm teaching them grammar, and I'm teaching them great, rich vocabulary, but I want them to learn to think, and I want them to be good global citizens. And I think that's one thing that would be so wonderful, would be for me to be able to bring all the great experts that are here into my classroom to contribute to what's going on. And so that would be my primary.
You want to hold a little more time over there? Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Suzette Verbeck. I'm a community member. Last time we had this event, I stood up and asked who had purchased art in the last month. You guys are showing us that art's important and how we need to work together, but we need the community to support the artists we have. And in the next couple months, we have a lot of art shows. The last few art shows have not had much attendance and very few purchases, so please go out and support our arts.
So I would like to, before you get an opportunity, I would like to respond to you. And one of the initiatives that we have right now is to build art programs in the city, meaning public art, performance art, and things like that. And one of the issues that I found when I first, it's easier to see it as an outsider than an insider, I think, to see the workings of things and how things aren't working. And there's a lot of nonprofits competing right now in the city, and the goal is, what we wanted to do is to bring them together so we can do more things together. And there's some artists that were in the room. When we had this meeting the other day, I brought Ed Woodham, or we, not me, we brought Ed Woodham on campus, the art department, and he spoke to the Greater Augusta Arts Council in the same room with artists, the same room with faculty. And this was evidently the first time that had happened in a long time. He does a public arts project, performance art, out of Brooklyn called Art in Odd Places. And he's really excited about coming here again and starting that and promoting things. And one of the things that he's really invested in is keeping art organizations from doing this thing called art washing, where you bring in nationally recognized artists to take the commissions, and then they leave with the money, and your local artists aren't promoted. And so what we're trying to do right now is get as many people in a room as possible to start talking and to really start promoting art as a critical component of our society here. And so I totally hear what you're saying, and we're working as hard as we can to solve that.
Yeah, there's so many people in this room today. I want to see them at events.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know if you would be willing, the artists here would be willing to serve in some of our projects. I'm not an artist by trade, and so there are times when I need someone else's perspective in my classroom, and it may be someone who can think and look at things differently than I can. And so I'd love to have some people to contact about that too.
It's been a great evening. I celebrate your being here. I thank you for that. One of the best things a dean can do is create a space for conversation. Hardly anything's better than that, a good little bit of food in the back of the room. We do have prepared for you a bit of an excuse to stay around and to visit. But you know, we work in a place here at the university which invites conversation, that celebrates community. This morning I was at a school. Mid-morning I was at the First United Methodist Church in Harrisburg. Next Tuesday I'll be at Fort Gordon. I'll be at 2 more schools. What we do here, to answer your question, is connect places. I'll go Friday to the garden. I want to see the raised gardens where we're looking about sustainability, quality life, the art of the art of living, basically. And I want to celebrate that the university invites the conversation. We are well served as a college of education in particular when we are situated right in the middle of the community. What better college is there than a college of education to be in the middle of the community where the schools happen, where children live, and where the communities thrive? So, Scott, if I might, I want to thank you for your coordination, the Panther School, for working with the College of Education. It is a great excuse to work with my artist friends. I want to thank Eric, Kendra Sue, Ashley, for your conversations about your innovation of disrupting the spaces in which you live. Yeah, I'm encouraging more of that, so thank you for that. And let's have a conversation, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Thank you. Oh, good. Okay. See, it worked.